Hi, my name is Dr. Steffanie Stecker, and I am the owner and clinical director of Mountain Vista Psychology. And one of the things we focus on supporting at Mountain Vista Psychology are people who have attention and impulsivity challenges. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time today talking about this with you guys. The goals of this video are to learn how focus ADHD challenges present throughout the lifespan, learn the difference between different ways executive function difficulties may present, and learn how to support your kid emotionally and behaviorally when they struggle with executive functions. So what are executive functions and ADHD? First, we're going to talk about what ADHD is. It's important to know that there are many people who have executive functioning challenges that do not have ADHD. So we're also going to talk about that. So executive functioning. Executive functioning, what is that, right? It is the cognitive processes used to regulate behavior and emotions to attain a goal. They include inhibition, impulse regulation, which is really the ability to stop a behavior when appropriate. Shifting, which is the ability to shift attention and adjust to changes and transitions. Emotional control, which is the ability to regulate emotions. Task initiation, which is being able to start tasks when appropriate. Organization, which is keeping your belongings organized. And then there's also the planning piece, which is it being able to break down projects, plan ahead, pull out main ideas. And self-monitoring, which is being aware of the way your behavior impacts others. So those are considered the executive functions. And many, people with ADHD have executive functioning challenges. But not everybody who has executive functioning challenges has ADHD. So let's talk a little bit about ADHD. There are 3 types of ADHD. So there's ADHD primarily inattentive, ADHD primarily hyperactive impulsive, and ADHD combined presentation, which means you have enough of the criteria of both the inattentive and hyperactive impulsive types. I think still as a society, when we think of ADHD, we're thinking about this stereotypically, right? The elementary school boy who is running circles around the classroom. And that is only one small snapshot of what ADHD is. And this is where I see a lot of people who get missed are people who have the primarily inattentive type of ADHD. So we're going to talk about that first. So primarily inattentive ADHD, what that is somebody who often fails to give close attention to details or makes careless mistakes in schoolwork, at work, or during other activities. Someone who often has difficulty sustaining attention in tasks, or if the person is a kid, play activities. So remaining focused during lectures, conversations, lengthy reading. You think about someone who, you're talking to them and they're like, oh, what'd you say? Like that sort of thing, right? Or if you have a child, then it would be somebody who you have to really try to get their attention because they're kind of in their own world. Then number 3 is often fails to listen when spoken to directly. So their mind is elsewhere, even in absence of obvious distraction. So they may, again, just kind of be in their own headspace. 4 does not follow through with instructions and fails to finish schoolwork, chores, duties in the workplace. And this is one that I think is so frustrating for both the person who's experiencing it as well as those around them, because those around them are often like, well, why can't you just do this? You know how to do this thing, right? Like, are you not doing your chores because you're being defiant, or you don't care about what I say, or you're lazy. Or the same thing in the workplace, right? Like, why can't you just get your stuff done? And I'll talk a little bit more about how this looks for kids and adults, but this one is a point of pain for people. The next is often has difficulty organizing tasks and activities. And this can be managing sequential tasks, difficulty keeping materials and belongings in order, messy, disorganized work, poor time management, the people who are always late, they forget to meet the deadline, kids with backpacks that are a mess, adults who put that bill somewhere they need to pay, or it's time to go and they can't find their keys, that sort of thing. Then 6 is often avoids, dislikes, or is reluctant to engage in tasks that require sustained mental effort. So this could be anything that is not of high interest. I think that's really important to point out. People who have ADHD can hyper-focus, meaning they can get super focused on things they love or are really interested in. It's everything else they can't focus on. So sometimes that's why I think it's misunderstood that people who have ADHD are lazy or don't care, which just isn't true. It's just really hard to focus on things that are not captivating for them. All right. Then continuing, number 7 is often loses things necessary for tasks or activities. So school materials, pencils, books, tools, wallets, keys, paperwork, eyeglasses, mobile phones. They misplace and lose them. And, sometimes they'll find them again. Sometimes they won't. Sometimes it's just going on a hunt, right? Like, where did I put that? I know I put it somewhere. But that happens a decent amount. Okay, number 8 is often easily distracted by extraneous stimuli. And for older adolescents, this may include unrelated thoughts as well as adults. And then is often forgetful in daily activities. So this could be doing the chores, running errands, returning calls, paying the bills, keeping appointments, right? All those sorts of things. For kids, it's things like remembering to brush your teeth, right? Remembering to take your bowl from the table to the sink and get it in the dishwasher. All right, let's talk a little bit about the primarily impulsive hyperactive type. And this one often fidgets with or taps hands or feet or squirms in seats. So, the wiggly worm. Often leaves his or her seat in the classroom or in other situations in which remaining seated is expected. And as we get older, we can refrain from doing these things, but we feel it. Like, we feel restless. We're fidgeting in ways, hopefully, we try to make it not as obvious. But as a kid, the movement is more clear. As an adult, it just feels physically uncomfortable often. Okay, often runs about or climbs excessively in situations and when it's inappropriate to do so. Has difficulty engaging in leisure activities quietly. Is often on the go or acts as if driven by a motor. Often these people talk excessively, like they just talk when it's something they love and are interested in. And this goes to the impulsivity where they may blurt out answers before questions have been completed. They're the kid that blurts out in class or even in conversation at home. And as adults, the impulsivity can show up in maybe having more car accidents or speeding tickets than would be expected. Okay, next, I think it's, what are we on, 7? Often has difficulty waiting turn, like waiting in line. And then often interrupts others, intrudes on others' conversations. Okay, so difference in the brain. So I think it's really important to understand that if someone has ADHD or executive functioning difficulties, it is not a character issue. It's it's a brain difference. So electrically, we know information travels neuron to neuron in the brain. There's an electrical reaction and a chemical reaction. And electrically, the difference is represented by too much theta. So they have too many slow brain waves. Others may have too much what's called high beta, which is too many faster brain waves. But there's an electrical difference. Chemically, it's considered to be a lower dopamine level or lower norepinephrine level. Children with ADHD are 4 times likely to have a relative with ADHD. And ADHD changes over time, but it is rarely outgrown. There used to be this thought that ADHD was a kid thing, and as they got older, it would go away. And it tends to morph more than it tends to go away. And also, as kids, you think kids, they need to be in this classroom and sit through the day. And a lot of adults with ADHD are able to be in occupations that best fit their ADHD needs, right? So it really tends to morph more than it tends to go away. So again, I keep hitting on this, but it's been, gosh, I've been, working with people with ADHD for about almost 20 years, I think. And one of the things that I see is just so much pain, because what is a brain difference is misrepresented as a character issue, that their person is lazy or doesn't care. And people with ADHD, if it's not supported well, can end up having a really low sense of worth and just feeling like they're not good enough or there's something wrong with them. And I always use my glasses analogy, but I need glasses or contacts in order to be able to see well. And it's the way my eyes are. I can try all day long to see well without my glasses or contacts, but it's not going to matter. I need that support for my eyes. And I think that it's important to think about it that way with the brain with ADHD, that those with ADHD, this is something, it's how their brain works, and they need support to help their brain work more optimally, so it's not as frustrating. So, there was, I think that there's definitely some thinking around this now, which I'm so grateful for. But when we have a physical health issue, like something you can see, like a broken leg, God forbid, cancer, something that's a physical health issue, we tend to think about it and treat it differently than we do something like ADHD or anxiety that is more of a mental health issue. And I think it's important to recognize that we have a tendency to do that and to reframe it so that we can best support instead of shame people. I think it's really, really important. Okay, so those with ADHD and executive functioning difficulties often have impacted social lives. And this can be because they're of the impulsivity. It could be because they're not focusing as easily on the conversations. And this is another point of pain. I'm not saying that many people don't have amazing social lives as well. There are a lot that it's hard for. So they may miss social cues. Kids who are hyperactive and impulsive, as well as adults, maybe in other people's space, that sort of thing. So I kind of wanted to break it down just in terms of age, what trends I see, right? And it doesn't mean this is everything. Again, these are generalizations. But in elementary school, I tend to hear kids with ADHD say they're not smart, they're lazy, they're confused why they get in trouble for things they can't help. Because if you think about that, that's kind of confusing. It's not intentional, so why am I getting in trouble? By the end of elementary school, they start to wonder if they're a bad kid. They may feel like there's something wrong with them, and they're hurt because they're trying their best and it often isn't good enough. So again, I want to develop empathy for what this is, whether it's you who has ADHD and you're listening to this, or whether you have a kid. I think empathy around this experience is so important. Okay, what I've heard those with ADHD say they feel like when they're in middle school. I tend to see a lot of kids start to check out around 4th grade if school's been difficult for them. And I've heard them say, if I have to try so hard and still don't do well, then why try? You hear that helplessness there, right? Some kids end up being class clowns in order to distract from what they're experiencing. Others own the laziness as a label. I'm just lazy. That's why. I'm just lazy, right? And they really are trying to figure out where they fit. Middle school is a time for that for all kids. For kids with ADHD, they definitely have another layer with it. They often feel like they fail a lot. And the missing assignments and extra organization required in middle school is hard. So this is a time period where if it's been more of an inattentive ADHD, middle school for a lot of people is the first time that it gets diagnosed. Because in elementary school, they don't have as many things to juggle, as many teachers, assignments, all of those sorts of things. Parents may be more involved, but in middle school, things shift and more is expected, and often that's harder to keep up with. Okay, let's talk about high school. Many kids in high school with ADHD are engaged in more risk-taking behaviors. The risk-taking behaviors tend to wake the brain up, so they feel really present. So they're attracted to those things more often. They often can end up having secondary anxiety or depression. They often own the label of being lazy and feel not good enough or fear social rejection. And missing assignments and grades tend to be present, with them functioning academically below their potential. And what I have heard those with ADHD feel like when they're adults, a lot of frustration with themselves around lack of focus at work, getting bored with their jobs or job hopping, fear of rejection, and a not good enough narrative. So again, these are all the things. I'm really just trying to develop empathy for the experience here, for something that's brain-based, it's not a character issue. That said, there are also a lot of beautiful things about people with ADHD. They can hyper-focus on things that they love, which means a lot of really successful entrepreneurs. I've known a lot of doctors. I've known a lot of lawyers, a lot of people who, art, if they love something art-wise, people in sports, because they really get into their sport and they rock it with their sport. So, in terms of work that they can do in their lives, there's a lot of different pathways that people with ADHD take. As long as it's something they're interested in, they can hyper-focus on it and rock it. It's amazing. And they're often really creative and have great energy. And because of some of the pain they've experienced, they're often really, really compassionate as well. So again, these are all generalizations, but just trying to support understanding of experiences. Okay, so again, I know I keep saying this, but I honestly can't say it enough. These things are not poor character. It's not laziness. It's not a choice. It's not that they don't care. If anything, when people with ADHD struggle with the symptoms of ADHD, they feel a lot of shame around it. So the best thing that you can do is assume your kid is doing the best they can with what they have at the time. And if you are the person with ADHD, the best thing you can do is honor your experience and also assume you are doing the best you can with what you have at the time. It doesn't mean you can't improve. It doesn't mean your kid can't improve. It doesn't mean you can't get more skills or try different interventions to support your brain and functioning in a way that isn't as frustrating, where you feel like you're having to fight your brain. But it is important to honor that this is not, I think as a culture, we minimize the impact of ADHD, and that it's important that this is not minimized. Okay. So internal versus external structure. Those with ADHD, the way I like to think about it, is they do not have the internal structure, so they need it provided externally. So that can be a lot of different things, but it definitely, structure is hard for those with ADHD, and it's what they need most, right? Okay, options to treating ADHD. Most of the research is on the pediatric population, but there's definitely generalization with this to adults. So level 1 interventions according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, which looks at all the peer-reviewed research, right? So these are research-based interventions. Level 1, medication or neurofeedback or parent management training or self-verbalization. Level 2, contingency management or exercise or social skills and medication or working memory training or parent management training and education. And to me, I think any further down the list, like, I don't know that I would use interventions that are not a level 1 or level 2. They do level 3, level 4, but why not go with the most effective things first? And the other thing is, counseling is not on this list. That said, counseling can be really helpful for the sense of worth that's been hurt through having ADHD, and to support with anxiety or any sort of sadness, those sorts of things around it. Counseling is not as effective for getting people to focus. So that's why it's not on the list. Although experimental, I have seen gluten sensitivity in higher rates for those with attentional issues, sugar impacting attention, and other food sensitivities that cause inflammation can be an issue as well. And those are great things to talk about with a doctor, naturopath, to get some support there if that's of interest. Options to treat ADHD. So again, those with ADHD can also benefit from counseling to support the emotional implications of it. So what you can do at home, if you're a parent, remember your child is doing the best they can with what they have in this moment. If you have ADHD, remember you are doing the best you can with what you have in this moment. Reflect back to your child all his or her strengths, provide external support and structure, and you can work with your child's school to see if he qualifies for a 504 IEP if he's been diagnosed with ADHD. If you're an adult, the Americans with Disabilities Act would help you get support if you're going back to school. You could get accommodations that way if you have a diagnosis. And then in the work environment, you know, there's ways you can learn to structure things so that you could be more successful as well. All right. So another thing is not being loaded down with too many instructions, having a consistent morning and evening routine, getting support breaking down projects, or if you're an adult, again, knowing that this is hard for you and you can also get support, whether it's through counseling. Some people have ADHD coaches, that sort of thing. Support with organizational strategies and movement breaks before doing work. Understand that even when all the supports in organization and sustained attention and breaking down projects are in place, it will still likely be difficult. And your child isn't being defiant. You aren't being lazy. It's just hard. Team up to problem solve, and don't punish what's hard. Instead, come alongside of them. All right. So the disclosure, these are this information is provided for educational purposes only. Nothing said should take the place of your own healthcare provider. This site cannot and does not provide medical advice of any sort. Always consult your own licensed physician or healthcare provider. And anything you do is always at your own risk when you're learning online. Okay. But if you would like more help, This is something we specialize in. You can call for a 20-minute phone consultation. We specialize in working with children, teens, and adults who have ADHD. We provide neurofeedback and counseling for those who have ADHD. We have therapists who specialize in different groups and work to ensure you're matched with the therapist who best meets your needs. So here's our information: 720-583-9332, info@mountainvistapsychology.com. You can email. And then our website is www.mountainvistapsychology.com. And again, we would love to support you if you or your child struggles with ADHD. It can be so beneficial to work with a professional trained in this area, and really can make a lot of difference in taking the next steps to create more of that life that where your potential's reached. All right, I hope this helps, and have a wonderful day. Bye.